Thank you, and good evening, everybody, members and those of you watching on the webcast to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee on Wednesday, the 14th of April 2021. Before I start, colleagues, I would just like to make reference to the fact that this week we are in a period of national mourning following the sad passing of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, and I would just ask that all members take a moment to reflect before we start this evening's proceedings. Thank you. A life of service well led. We send our condolences to his family and to the country. So, this evening's meeting, I would first like to, we do not have any substitutes, so welcome to everybody. Agenda item 1 are declarations of interest. Members, do you have any declarations of interest of a personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest in the proceedings on the agenda this evening? I'll take that as a no, I suspected so. Agenda item 2 is public participation. Let me just grab my phone so I can get the timer. We have 2 members of the public speaking this evening. The first is Gwen Swinburne. Gwen, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me, Chair?
I can hear you perfectly, yes.
That's nice. Thank you. I'll start then. Thank you. Chair, this is also frustrating. When it comes to basic governance and transparency, we take a couple of steps forward and many back. Are you still there?
Yes,
hello,
yes,
hello.
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, carry on. Yeah, no, we heard all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. In November, we saw a properly presented report about the new complaint system with proper document management. Likewise, electronic links to background papers in one report today was a shuffle forward, but the basics should be done as standard. So the steps backwards. In the 2011 Labour administration, all FOIs were uploaded in a disclosure log on a weekly basis. I recall checking them every week. You can imagine my shock when yesterday all I could find was 3 months minimal entries, neither the FOI question nor the answer posted. This is a massive problem and is a huge retrograde step. This must be a mistake. Next, I understand the new complaint system was supposed to start 1st of April. I looked online, the 2011 system was still there, and nothing of the new system. I heard today that the old version somehow overrode the new one all by itself, so we're waiting for the new one to be uploaded again. Third, Chair, as at every meeting, the complete absence of any mention of replacing the indie person is upsetting. Finally, Chair, this NDA report from the interim head of HR is an absolute disgrace. It seems the usual story. Members agreed a series of actions back in 2019, which are not reflected in this cut and paste effort. As so often happens, you all know, members decide something, it may or may not be minuted correctly or completely, and only those bits that staff like are codified or acted upon. Chair, it has to be said that this report, a new low, is with clearly no chief officer assurance. Trust and confidence in these top managers is further tested by such poor quality reports. Once again, I am forced to comment on the most basic administrative failures ahead of any substance. Chair, by now I had hoped that the Director of Governance would have added desperately needed quality assurance to both governance and transparency. But in truth, we know the opposite is true. As much as councillors try, we slip further away from basic good governance and transparency, and it is so painful to watch.
30
Thank
seconds.
you, Chair.
Oh,
I'm done. Done.
in time. Thank you very much for your comments, and I'm sure that the vast majority of the points that you've raised will be discussed at some point in this evening's meeting. Please continue to watch the webcast if you'd like to, but you can now leave the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I'll send them through. Bye-bye.
Councillor Mason has raised his hand.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I should have caught you before the meeting. I've got my second vaccination tonight, so I'm going to have to leave probably around 7 o'clock. So just if we're still going on, then just so.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah.
Oh, an exciting day.
Yeah. I know how bad I'm going to feel tomorrow after the first one, but.
Well, yes, yeah, I think that was, that was certainly my experience. Well, anyway, good luck. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Just leave the meeting, Councillor. Our second speaker is our erstwhile colleague, Andy Mendes. Andy, are you with us?
I am, Michael.
Marvellous, marvellous. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. You've got 3 minutes. Start whenever you like.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. 3 points, really. First, on the annual report, for completeness, it might be good to include the start date of the annual report, since it isn't an annual report, as well as the end date, because I guess it started in April 2019 on this occasion. Within it, I'm reassured that Emma thinks that members now receive electronic copies of internal audit reports by email throughout the year in order to improve oversight. I hope this means that the agreed procedures are back in place, and I'd appreciate confirmation both that all completed reports for this period, e.g. those listed in the 15th of July 2020 report, have been published, and that future publication will be timely and available online for ex-people like me. The report also states members considered regular follow-up reports setting out progress made by council departments in implementing actions agreed as part of internal audit work. I don't think I've seen any follow-up reports at all in this reporting period. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Okay, on the work programme, the Veritao work programme for next year, I'm pleased to see Section 106 appearing again and hope there will finally be some progress. No sign of absence management. I know CCS SMC are continuing their interest, but I would be interested to see the audit report on absence management, which stated fieldwork had been completed in July 2020. Has it been published anywhere? I can't find it if it has. And I'm always interested in that. And finally, on settlement agreements and NDAs, in Trudy Forster's report to A&G in 2009, she said that in an employment law context, in order to give effect to a mutual termination of employment, a settlement agreement will include a non-disclosure clause. Settlement agreements are legally binding contracts that waive an individual's rights to make a claim, and so on. Payment is made on a commercial basis and is dependent upon risk and circumstances. The financial settlement is usually linked to what the employee would have received in notice entitlement. So am I right? It wasn't clear from Trudy's report this time. Am I right that NDAs are included in all the settlements reported in this paper? The A&G discussion in March 2019 that Trudy refers to focused on the involvement of elected members, and specifically executive members, in deciding settlement agreements and NDAs, and I think that's now resolved. We didn't spend much time considering why CYC, and maybe especially local authority schools, need to use settlements at all. I can just about understand why NDAs might be required after an acrimonious departure in a sensitive department. But it's a stretch for the public body to do this so frequently and apparently without much thought. I hope you'll have a good discussion about that later on. I will be listening. Thank you very much. See you next time, hopefully.
Thank you, Andy. and yes, I'm sure that the majority of the points that you've raised will be brought up in our discussions. And as I said to Gwen, I very much hope you'll continue to watch. And yes, we will hopefully see you next time.
Okay. All right, Michael. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye.
Best of luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, colleagues. That's the end of public participation. So we can now move to the agenda proper, and the first agenda item is amendments to the Constitution by the Monitoring Officer. And I will hand over to Janie Berry. I did forget to say at the beginning of the meeting that we also have a number of officers who you'll see coming on screen if they're not already there when their agenda item comes up. And I would ask all council officers and colleagues when they first speak just to introduce themselves and to give their job titles. So I will hand over to the monitoring officer because I've kind of already told you who she is. Janie.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. I'm Janie Berry. I'm the Council's Monitoring Officer and Director of Governance. This is a report which brings members' attention that in line with the roadmap out of lockdown, the government issued updating health protection regulations, which are detailed within the report. And these are required so that colleagues in public protection can carry out the new responsibilities we've got during the lockdown period, during this exit from the lockdown period up to the 21st of June. So this is to allow them to undertake the statutory requirements that is now expected of them. I will be reporting this to a future meeting of full council. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Janie. Very short report. And can I just ask, Janie, that as legislation lapses, will that be removed then from the Constitution?
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Yes, it will. And then obviously, as we review the Constitution, you will see the sort of like flip-flopping, the adding in and the taking away periodically. So I'm intending to review the Constitution on a 6-monthly basis. So it's at that point where you will see the formal change appearing in the Constitution. So I don't want to kind of, incur a lot of paper for anybody who's got a paper copy, for example. So we will be doing a 6-monthly review, and it is at that point where a lot of them will be removed. As you know, a lot of them relating to the COVID-19 pandemic has what is called sunset clauses, which means that they have very specific end dates, which actually at this moment in time are all different end dates. So that's why a 6-monthly review might be better, where you can see what that looks like in terms of amended lists of legislation.
Marvellous, thank you. Can I ask colleagues, do they have any questions? And just for those watching on YouTube, if a councillor has a question, they will press a button on their screen which will raise an electronic blue hand, which I will see. If there is a supplementary question to any question that's been asked, they will raise a physical hand. If we come to a vote on any issue, which I don't expect that we will this evening, that will be by hand vote. So, colleagues, anything? No? Well, this report is for noting, so you can take it that we have noted your report, and thank you very much indeed, Janie. So, agenda item 4 is the corporate governance report. And this is again a report from Janie. So I will hand over to you, Janie.
Thank you, Chair. So this, as we reported on the last occasion, the information governance team has had a renaming in line with a refresh and a review of its service offer. So this is now classed as the corporate governance report, which which covers all of the work areas which are in Lorraine Lunt's team. So Lorraine is present in the meeting this afternoon, and I propose that we hand over to Lorraine, who can take us through it. It's quite a detailed report, and I think she can also respond to members' questions and perhaps respond to some of the comments made by the public participants as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and welcome, Lorraine. I shall hand over to you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lorraine Lunt, and I'm the Council's Information Governance, Feedback, Corporate Governance Team Manager, also responsible for records management and the Data Protection Officer. I want to present this report to you that covers information governance performance, one of our regulators, the Information Commissioner's Office decision notice from the last report to this committee and now, and also the local government social care ombudsman decisions and cases between that time period. Also give you an update, although it's only been 14 days since the launch and implementation of the new 4Cs toolkit and approach, an update on our annual NHS Digital Data Security and Protection Toolkit assessment, and to I'll update you on the review of the Council's RIPA policy and procedures. So moving on to the information governance performance, which I've included a link to where that information in its entirety is on the York Open Data platform, but is also at Annex 1 with some details in a table and highlighted format. I would like to draw your attention to the small improvements that we've managed to maintain in both subject access request timeliness performance, which has increased in the last quarter. So that's the time period between January and March this year. And also that we've managed to sustain a fairly high level of in-time performance for FOIs and EIRs during the whole 12 months of local restrictions and lockdown restrictions, and the implications those contingencies plans had for the resources within the council and across the council to respond to requests such as FOIs and EIRs. The next set of my report is the ICO decision notices, and for this part of my report I'm able to say there's actually been no decision notices by the ICO published in that time frame. The next section is moving on to Ombudsman from the local government ombudsman cases, and those are at Annex 2, and I'm happy to take any questions at any point or at the end of this report on any particular cases in there. If there's details that I'm unable to provide straight away, I also have my colleague Kath Murray in the meeting, and she may be able to help answer any of the detailed questions on the Ombudsman cases if needed. The implementation of the new 4Cs, so that's complaints, compliments, concerns and comments, did go live on the 1st of April this year, and that, as you're aware from previous reports, is the move from the hierarchical and rigid 3-stage process that we had previously, and that was continuing to be criticised and did not reflect both complainants and ombudsman's requirements for handling complaints effectively and efficiently. As explained previously, we are working with our business intelligence team on the new performance and quality reports that will come both to service areas, our corporate management team, as well as this committee going forward, and I will bring at my next report in July a new style report and format and content for your comments and feedbacks. So if there's anything you think's missing, anything else you would like to see, any details you would like to see, potentially what kind of style you may want to see those in, do you want to see some trend analysis, lines, etc. on it, with the ability to provide you with a report in the September corporate governance report with those figures and data in those agreed styles and format. The other thing to mention around the 4Cs, and picking up on a comment from the public participant, the current website pages do reflect the 4Cs new approach and the detail on the website pages. However, unfortunately, one of the download links was to the the previous corporate policy in its entirety. That has been raised with our website team, and we will ensure that it's updated as soon as possible. However, the information on the actual website pages do reflect the 4Cs approach and timescales, etc. The next section is on our National Health Service Digital Data Security and Protection Toolkit, and this is just to provide you with an update that we continue to achieve the assurance level required for access to NHS systems and data. As a healthcare and social care organisation, we are required to maintain and succeed on a level 2 assurance, and that was maintained at 31st of March this year, and we will produce an action plan and an improvement plan from that assessment, which will be managed and monitored through both the work in my team and with public health and several teams across the council, including the Caldecott Guardians within the council, and it will be managed and monitored through the Governance Risk Assurance Group and then into this report where needed and or requested. Finally, just bringing you on to an update and a piece of news and information on, we are updating and reviewing our RIPA, so the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act requirements within the council, and we are going to be providing mandatory training to both those officers who make applications under RIPA or the relevant other legislation for investigations, and also for those officers who have authorising powers and roles. That'll be provided in May, and from there we will hopefully have the opportunity to put in place and implement a revised and updated policy and procedures. At this point, I'll move over to any questions or anything that you want to ask or raise.
That's fine. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you for your report. I've got Councillors Fisher and Mason. Councillor Fisher first.
Thank you. Just a bit of housekeeping. The figures on page 12 are inaccurate. The bottom right figure, 47 out of 204, it should be 23.03%, not 29.94%. I just wonder if that could be corrected, please.
Absolutely, I will do. Thank you, Councillor Fisher. I'll check where that.
The others are correct. I've checked them all.
Oh, was that it, Councillor Fisher?
Yeah, just like to get things right.
No, absolutely brilliant. Yes, well done for the ex-teacher. Councillor Mason.
Thank you. You'd be pleased to know, Lorraine, my maths is probably not as good as Tony's. On the kind of grid of complaints at the end of the report, the one that ends in 365, I think it's the second one down, regarding Mrs. X and the garage. Obviously, it says it happened twice. I just wondered what the story was there, or if you knew off the top of your head.
I would have to go into the details of the complaint in the investigation. Are you happy for me to circulate around all members and make available the answer to your question, the detail?
Yeah.
It will be available on the LGSCO's website because they publish the full report into it, but I absolutely understand that it is just a summary that you get within this report. Unless, Kath, you have an answer that you can give now, or do we just respond?
Hi, it's Kath Murray, Corporate Complaints Manager. Yeah, I think it probably would be better to actually look at sending the link round to people, because I think that'll give you the full information about what the Ombudsman actually found. And I guess that's something we can do with any of those reports if people would like them.
Yeah, thanks. It's just because then it goes on at the end to say about court deciding a value and things. It's just a bit kind of a bit more details, and obviously it's the second time, so that'd be really interesting. And my other question was just around what level of officer can authorise another officer to use RIPA powers?
That's part of the review at the moment. It has currently the authorising, there is a separate process. We have officers and members of staff who can apply under any of the RIPA powers. So for direct surveillance, covert surveillance, or using, and again, it's the covert human intelligence sources, or CHIS applications. So there is a way, and also where you're wanting to use the RIPA process to safeguard any other type of what may be seen as intrusive surveillance, such as looking at Facebook, TikTok, etc. We would use the RIPA process for the application or the request to use those powers for an investigation. We then have a separate level, more senior officer would look at being the authorizer of the application. And then at another stage, there is also the requirement to put it in front of a magistrate. So there is checks and balances throughout the whole process where it isn't the same person or the same level of officer making the application, checking the application, and or authorising it, and also all the way up to a magistrate's level.
Brilliant. I think after line of duty, CHIS is probably the only acronym now you don't need to tell us. I think everyone knows what CHIS is.
Thank you. Councillor Webb raised his hand for a supplementary, and you've got your mouthpiece up. There you go.
Yeah, I always keep it up there, else I'll just imitate. My question was from the first part of Councillor Mason's question, and it is about not the details of any of the cases that are outlined in the Ombudsman's report, but it's more about, particularly in that one where it's happened twice, I suppose it'd be quite useful to almost get a summary of like lessons learned. Because, you know, if it happened the first time when it should have been reported, and then there almost should be like and therefore in the future we won't do this, or whatever the appropriate learning might be. And I just wondered if that's something that happens, or how does that get fed into different departments, and if maybe we could get a report.
So the move on to the 4Cs was about being able to close that circle, close that loop of feedback from complaints and doing those lessons learned. The previous procedure as well did have a stage in it where we would look at action plans resulting from complaints, looking at themes and lessons learned. So not just on one particular complaint and action happening, but looking at the themes and where the lessons learned from what may have went wrong in that particular area, how that can inform and help improve and reduce the risk of it happening across other services in the council. So absolutely, we are doing the lessons learned with that move to the complaints advisors doing the start to the end of the process, and including ensuring that the CATH's role and the advisors have regular attendance at managers' meetings or DMTs, as well as feeding into corporate management team of those lessons learned and themes. And that will be part of what you'll see in future reports. So when I've mentioned that at the next report in July, you'll see sight of a format, style and content for your comment and feedback. There will be those lessons learned and actions taken, and where we've been able to, as we move forward with that process and those procedures, show that it is making a difference, not just in that one particular area, but across the council as well. So absolutely, yes, those will be in future reports, but there will need to be a bit of time into managing through using the new process and the new way of working within the team for that to have a lot of data and information in it. But the Ombudsman reports, if you do look at the full reports within the link and within the Ombudsman's publication of cases, you will see that they expect lessons to be learned, and they want copies and confirmation of where they've made recommendations, remedies or actions that we've done that.
So can I just clarify? Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it is useful for the public to sort of see that, oh, a general thing has happened, a case has happened, and we're dealing with it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So you can confirm that the LGO findings are published on the website?
They're published through the link to the Ombudsman's website, where they publish all local authorities. If there is a way for us to link in going forward through our web services team to our published, so making the link direct to where they publish those full reports, I will certainly investigate and see if that happens. What would be and or if there is an appetite and a way of us publishing their decisions on our website, I will look into that and feedback the answer and responses and options.
Because we do we do publish the ICO findings, don't we, on our website?
We only publish the ICO findings through this report to Audit and Governance Committee, and the link would be to where the ICO publishes them.
I mean, I don't know what colleagues feel, whether colleagues have an opinion as to whether it would be advisable for the council's website to have direct links to the finding, so that it's easily accessible in one place. But yeah, I certainly think that from a transparency perspective, it will be helpful. But I saw Councillor Fisher raised his hand and his hand's gone down again. Do you have a question, Councillor Fisher? It's up again now.
I unmute. I'm trying to unmute and I hit reactions by. No, the matter was covered in what was said just now. So thank you.
Right, marvellous. I've got a couple of questions, one from the report and one from the public participants. Paragraph 2.5, he says, since the last report to committee, work is still not complete across different information governance networks and groups in Yorkshire and the Humberside region regarding sharing of information and best practice. We've been kind of getting this for some considerable time. If it's not possible, it would probably be better just to say you haven't got the time to do it, or if it is going to happen, do you have any indication as to when that comparator work will be done?
It's not a capacity or time issue on my part that this work hasn't progressed. It's within the different regional groups, the discussions and the ongoing deliberations on how people collect, manage and monitor their figures and their responses, and making sure that anything that is put out there as comparative information or comparator benchmarking information is actually using apples and apples and not apples and pears. So that's where the discussions are at a regional level around making sure that everybody is capturing and being able to record and then being able to manage those figures and calculate those figures in the same way that it would be useful benchmarking on comparative information. So it's not a timeliness or a time requirement or difficulty from City of York Council's approach.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, I think I got that. And then just to go to the point that was raised by the public participant in respect of FOI, FOIs on the database, on the computer system. What's the word I'm looking for?
Website.
Website. Jesus. Yeah, on the website. I had to look something up the other day from North Yorkshire Police, and I did a Google search relating to hate crimes, and I was able to get every FOI that they'd had in respect of hate crime going back to 2012, I think it was. Why can we not do a similar system? And is 3 months worth of FOIs on the website really sufficient? Because I mean, people otherwise people end up putting the same type of FOI in time and time again, potentially, whereas they could just look it up, see what topic area it was, and if it's, you know, if it's from 2014, they may realize that it might be old information, but why can't we do that?
It's not that we can't. It would mean work with the web services team and also system development time and resource to look at how we can put those systems in place to put that on the website. The format and style of the current disclosure log, including the 3 months, is in line with all our obligations, both under the FOI Act and also the publication scheme that is required by law for us to all have, including the ICO. I absolutely, our previous format and style was heavily complained about and heavily criticised, and was one of the reasons we looked at what we could do differently and better, and also took account of at that point, the forthcoming and the upcoming website accessibility regulations. So we looked at what is the obligations, what do we have to publish as part of a disclosure log, and it is making available what we've had requested and have we been able to respond either in full or in part. I have taken on board all your comments from today, including the public participants, and I'm happy to go and look at what are the capabilities of both our current system and our future system, case management, that we will be looking to upgrade after the 31st of December or by the 31st of December this year. And I've also happy to come back potentially in the September corporate governance report and give you an update and a comparison on the previous format and style and uptake and use of the FOI disclosure log and the current version. I'll also speak with the web services team to look at how we can increase the capacity and look at keeping disclosure logs on the council website for longer than the 3-month period.
Good.
Again, there's nothing in the legislation or the requirements that says how long a disclosure log should be kept for. It should be in line with good practice, best practice, and any other retention periods that are set within or on a council record. For example, if you've said that you're only going to keep FOI information for 3 years, yet you've got a disclosure log showing FOIs going back to 2011, you may be in breach of part of your own records management requirements in that. So we would have to look at a number of factors. I am happy to do that, to go away and revisit the issues that are being raised around the current disclosure log and report back at the latest in the September corporate governance report. But I can assure all committee, etc. today that the current format and style does comply with the obligations of the FOI Act and the publication scheme. And it was introduced following a number of ongoing and several high-level complaints regarding the previous format and style that was in use, that it was difficult to use, very impossible to navigate and or search through.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that response. I just wonder whether the then reaction to that has gone a little bit too far. You know, yes, we meet the requirements, but you know, just meeting the minimum legislative requirement of the FOI Act. Is that really where we want to see ourselves as an authority? I mean, that's just my view. You may hold a different view, and it may not be feasible. But that's just my view.
It's not that I'm only looking to ensure that we meet the minimum requirements. It's about meeting the different sometimes competing requirements around accessibility regulations. So, for example, we aren't now able to, if we want to meet the website accessibility regulations, put things onto the website that are in PDF format. So there would need to be a different approach to all FY responses, where we were relying on and sending in as part of that response a PDF piece of information or documentation. So there are lots of bits that I would need to review and consider and present back to yourselves for discussion and feedback on what the opportunities are for making any further changes to the disclosure log.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions that colleagues might have? No, in which case I would like to thank both yourself, Lorraine, and Kath. Always very pleasant to have you here, and you're at the beginning of the agenda rather than the end, which is always a bonus. So yes, thank you very much indeed, and we shall see you in July and then subsequently in September.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
So the next agenda item is, well, it's agenda item 6, I think. Is it 5? Is it 6? Have I lost count? Here we go. Oh yes, this is a report of the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. I don't know why I tried to gloss over that one. Yes, this is a report that I didn't write, but I did have sight of before it was published. Who wants to? Does Janie want to speak on this?
Chair, I'm happy to. You're quite right. You didn't write it, but you were consulted on it.
Yes.
And obviously it is your report, which will ultimately be shared with full council. It is an extended period. So because of the lockdown, the public participant was correct. It does cover a slightly longer period than the standard 12-month period. But we've tried to be sort of comprehensive in covering the activities that this committee has undertaken over that extended period, and also gave reasons as to why there was a little bit of a break in business due to the pandemic. It's quite a detailed report, Chair, and I'm hoping that all members have had time to consider it. Happy where I can to take any questions on it, but also to ask that members of this committee are content with the final version of this report as well, prior to it being presented to full council. So if there are sort of significant amendments to be made or suggestions for alterations of wording, perhaps, Chair, you might be willing, with the committee's sanction, to consider the final approved draft outside of this meeting, and we can share with you and with members outside of this meeting sort of any amendments which need to be made.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Webb.
Sorry, I should have put up my virtual hand, but
that's all right, yeah. Don't worry.
On page 23, on the internal audit and counter fraud section, I remember distinctly when first joining this committee, receiving lots and lots of emails on audits that had been carried out. And I have to say that recently, I think the number of audits that we've received seems to have decreased. And I wonder, is there a specific reason for that I've missed, and or not? And is it worth maybe mentioning that in the report?
So, Chair, I can look at that, but I'm also conscious that Max Thomas is also attending the meeting this afternoon, so it may be that he can answer. I think there was obviously a disruption on the delivery of the audit plan, which was caused by the pandemic and a focus of different activities as well. So there has been, and I think that's been reported previously, but it's certainly an issue that I can look into for this covering period up to March 21. And perhaps make some commentary around it after having conversations with my colleagues outside of this meeting.
Shall we wait while we get Max in for the next agenda item? And I think it's a really relevant question, because I think I can only remember reading a couple of audit reports during lockdown. So I suspect there may have been more, but yes, I think it's a very valid point. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's worth including in the report, but I think it was mentioned by one of the public speakers that we have been operating for a little while now without an independent person. I just wondered how close we are to actually getting somebody, because I think having an independent person not connected with the council is a very valuable thing. How close are we to getting somebody?
So it is next on my list after delivery of the election.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
That was a very clear answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Councillor Webb.
Is it going to be as big an election? It seems quite serious, doesn't it? But no, I think that I would echo those points. I do think we need that independent person. On page 24, paragraph 12, obviously it's about the external audit letter. Summarises the report of Mazars, and obviously we've just received that in the last, probably less than a month ago now, and I was wondering if it is worth mentioning those 3 points as to why the audited accounts were so delayed this time round. I just think that it obviously it's an overview report, but it is quite scant on the detail, and that's seemed to me to be quite a serious delay, and I wonder if it's worth mentioning just those 3 points as to these were the things that the auditors were then looking into over time. I suppose up to you, Chair, but I thought it might be useful for that detail.
Do you have a view on it, Janie?
No, I can again look at that. Need to speak to my sort of colleagues, Emma Audrain, who helped author this as well, so I can look back at that.
I mean, if you were going to add a sentence, it may be worth just due to concerns raised at the time of the draft accounts, investigations needed to take place, which delayed the signing off of the annual accounts before end of March 2021. I suppose just as an additional paragraph sentence, but yeah, I will, be guided by your and Emma's view after the outside of the meeting. I have a question, and I have raised it with you, Janie, in respect of page 28. And that's the functions of the Audit and Governance Committee, and it is relevant to the point that Councillor Webb has just raised, which is to consider the action plan arising from the annual letter of the external auditor. And then next to it says, with respect to the annual letter being first considered and accepted by the executive. Now, I cannot for the life of me understand why that is in there, why it's historically been in there. The external letter of the auditor has got absolutely nothing to do with the executive. It's a matter for the chief officer and yourself and the Audit and Governance Committee. So why was that in? And can I have the assurance that it will no longer be in any future draft when we review the Constitution?
So this extract of the terms of reference to the committee is simply there just as an aid memoir, but it is actually a historic version of the terms of reference. This is in the Constitution that I inherited when I joined City of York Council, and to be honest, I absolutely agree with you that there is no role for the executive in this section. So I can't really answer why that was put in. I would not, as the monitoring officer, I would not support that being included. And as you know, that we're doing a review of the Constitution, and in March 2020, this committee also took an interim review of its terms of reference as well. And I think at that point, this was actually removed. Yeah. It's just that this is a historic copy of the terms of reference, but because of the meeting happening immediately before the lockdown and the updated terms of reference, etc., not getting reported to full council until October 2020, things have just not caught up. So I apologise for that, but going forward, that condition or that commentary certainly will not feature in the terms of reference for this committee going forward.
Great, marvellous, thank you very much. Are there any other questions or issues that anybody wants to make? Seemingly not. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for that, Janie. And we're scampering through this agenda.
Chair, can I just confirm that members of the committee would be happy for me to liaise directly with yourself and the Vice Chair about the slight amendments that members of the committee have asked me to include in the annual report?
I'm sure that they would. Yes, I see nods. I see nods. Yes. Thank you, Janie. Yes, that's great. Agenda item 6, internal audit and counter fraud plans 21-22. And we have Max Thomas. Max, would you like to introduce yourself and your role, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Max Thomas. I'm from Verito, and Verito is the council's shared service, and one of the services we provide to the council is internal audit. So I'm also the council's head of internal audit. This report sets out the internal audit and counter fraud programs of work for the current year. And as you'll recall, we presented a draft version of the internal audit plan to the committee back in February. At that time, we also asked you to identify possible areas for inclusion in the internal audit plan for 21-22. So turning to the report on tonight's agenda, in the covering report, we explained that the internal audit plan is risk-based and it's been subject to consultation with senior management as well as this committee. It's been informed by the council's risk management processes, its corporate plans and ongoing projects, and it's also informed by sector-wide risks and emerging issues which are sort of shared through our regular professional networks. In terms of the internal audit plan, I'd also highlight the fact that it's a high level and flexible plan, so it will be kept under review during the year, and it will be updated as the year progresses. The scope of each audit will be agreed as part of the sort of detailed planning process for those pieces of work. So this approach is designed to ensure that our audit work remains relevant. It's focused on the council's current risks and priorities, and it adds value. So as well as the covering report, there's two annexes. The internal audit programme of work is set out in Annex 1, and just for completeness, we've included the counter fraud programme of work in Annex 2. So very happy to take any questions on either of those two planned work programmes.
Colleagues. Well, I've got a couple of Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Webb.
It's just taking up Councillor Webb's very valid point. When I first joined the Audit Governance Committee, we got a vast stream of internal audits, which we actually went through. I think I got one the other day. It was the first one I had for a considerable amount of time. Are these internal audits actually still taking place on a regular basis, not just being sent to us? Because it is useful for us to have an overview of what's going on.
Okay, as Janie mentioned in the previous item, we effectively paused internal audit work back in March when the pandemic started. So at that point, we had quite a lot of work in progress. We had reports that were in draft form, and we had other audits that were sort of in the planning process. So there was a whole raft of work. That work was paused. and that was really to allow council officers to concentrate on the pandemic. The last thing they probably needed at that point was to also be subject to internal audit. So we paused the work, and that included follow-up work as well, and that was agreed with the council's officers. We then brought, if you recall, we brought the plan to the committee in July, the plan for the 2019-20 the 2020 audit plan. So that work then started to pick up in the autumn. So we are effectively we're in a catch-up situation where work is now it's been completed. It's sort of moving. It's going through the sort of draft report process. It's being signed off. So over the next few months, you will start to see lots of reports being finalised. So it's effectively just a reflection of what happened back at the beginning of last year.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear it's just a hiatus, because it does give a peace of mind to see a lot of internal audit reports coming through with, generally speaking, very, very few areas of concern. It just helps us to be assured that things are going well at the council. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Webb, did you raise your hand? I think you did.
I did, but it was just to congratulate Councillor Fisher for noticing my excellent point. But yeah, no, it has now been answered. So thank you.
Oh, marvellous.
Give credit where it's due.
So can I ask you a question, Max? The areas for the draft work plan, it's got lots and lots and lots of possible audit areas, which you've accepted nobody could do in the time you've got available. How do you rank them? And I know you've just mentioned it's on a risk-based approach that you take, but for our purposes, for our benefit, these are just bullet pointed. Would it be helpful if we could see a ranking of which approaches you were going to take? I can see advantages and disadvantages to that, by the way, but I just thought I would ask you.
We can. I mean, we certainly have initial an initial schedule of work, so we know which audits we're planning to do first. As we've discussed, it is a flexible plan though, so it may change, and as the report says, we don't expect to complete everything on that list. So, we can certainly share the ones we see as the sort of first priorities. We can certainly do that.
I mean, I think that would be helpful. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I think that would, for our purposes, be helpful. But I appreciate, is there some sort of level of confidentiality that you work to, so that you don't necessarily want a department to know that you're going to be auditing them in, say, September time? Or how does it work?
No, we're completely open with people. We say, these are the areas we want to audit in your directorate this year. We do talk to people about when best to do the work, because clearly there's some areas where we wouldn't want to do a lot of financial type audits when the finance team are sort of preparing the budgets and doing close down. So it makes sense to have those sort of discussions quite early on, so that we can schedule the work.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. Are there any other questions for Max? Just in respect of the public participant, Max, just whilst it's still fresh in my mind, the follow-up reports, and I appreciate that because everything was on a hiatus, we didn't get many follow-up reports because obviously they weren't done. When recommendations are made and follow-ups are done, what assurance do we have as a committee, having seen the original audit, that you are now satisfied and that reasonable assurance, for example, moves up a ranking?
Okay, I mean, in normal times, if you recall, we agree an action plan with management, so that sets out what they're going to do and when they say they will complete the whatever actions they need to take, and our follow-up process sort of tracks those target completion dates, and we will follow up. Now, the extent of follow-up testing will vary depending on the sort of how serious we consider the issue. So if it's a priority 1 ranking, we'll certainly go back and do further testing to make sure that action has actually been completed. But it will vary. If we're not satisfied that an action's been completed, or there's delay, or effectively the risk isn't being addressed sufficiently quickly, there is then an internal escalation process, and ultimately we will report back to yourselves that we consider an action hasn't been dealt with in an appropriate period of time.
That's lovely, thank you. I don't see any other hands, and I'd just like to just tell colleagues, we've lost now Councillor Mason, but we remain quorate. So, so thank you very much indeed, Max, and we shall see you in a couple of months.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh no, he's still here.
I am here, Chair. I don't know how that flipped off.
No, I thought you'd already set off for your vaccine. No, we'll be definitely still quorate then. Right, lovely. You didn't have any questions because I didn't see your hand coming up. So no, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll move on now to agenda item 7, which is a report from the Head of Human Resources, and it's in respect of settlement agreements. And I'd like to welcome Trudy. Trudy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Trudy Foster, Head of HR. So I am here this evening to provide you with the annual figures and costs associated with the settlement agreements made across the Council. It follows a new process that was introduced in late 2019. And then obviously due to COVID, I didn't bring a report back in the April time, and hence this report does cover that wider period. Before we do get onto the figures, I did think it would be helpful for members of the committee to have a bit of the background on the use of settlement agreements and some of the discussion around confidentiality clauses, because some members might not have been part of the committee in 2019. So I know it's been referred to as cutting and pasted. I did cut and paste some of the document from the 2019 report just so that it was easy for you to refer to. And Miss Swinburne has helpfully pointed out to me today that some of the links didn't work at the end of the report, so we will get that sorted with Democratic Services and redo the links at the end of the report so that's readily available.
Great.
So as well as that, and from the report, we have been working with external auditors over the past few months, and we've identified the need to review the template business case that's used. So that template is included in the document, but that we do need to review that to record the decisions with much more detail around where there's a financial impact and value for money assessment. So we will be working on changing that template from what's included in the report, and we'll bring that back to the committee in the near future. So that work is ongoing. There is often confusion then regarding the terminology, and frequently many people refer to non-disclosure agreements. In the 2019 report, that included what the difference was between the settlement agreement with a confidentiality clause and a non-disclosure agreement that's often referred to. At paragraph 9 in the report that you've got before you at page 50, I've included that definition of the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement. And I can say that at CYC, we do not have any standalone NDAs in operation. So that's a very different concept to the settlement agreement. We do use, though, confidentiality clauses within our settlement agreements. And this is where some of the confusion happens, that confidentiality clause is often referred to as an NDA, and that's where some of the confusion happens. When we are agreeing the mutual termination of employment relationship, the employer, so ourselves at CYC, along with the employee, can agree a settlement agreement, but this is not a dismissal. So it's to be clear that a settlement agreement is that mutual termination of the employment relationship, and not a dismissal. At paragraph 13, it's got that ACAS definition there for reference. Again, that is the cut and paste from the 2019 report, just to make it a bit easier for committee to see. There are legal safeguards in place around the use of settlement agreements. They're shown in paragraph 15, and we can't use settlement agreements in relation to safeguarding matters and cannot prevent future litigation in an employment tribunal on the grounds of discrimination and whistleblowing. So that's in terms of the protection around staff. The process, as we agreed in 2019, involves the relevant executive member having discussions with that chief officer regarding the situation and the case, and the parameters around which consultation can occur. So around what monetary value are we looking at, what's the case, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, and that discussion happens before we start the consultation with the individual and their trade union representative. So prior to that 2019, and rightly so, as an audit committee, you identified that members didn't have any formal role in that process and no oversight, and hence why this process has been put in place. So the new process agreed with that upfront approval from the executive member, and the executive member used is the one that's relevant for that area in which the mutual termination is going to happen. So if it was a case in the People Directorate, then Councillor Runciman or Councillor Cuthbertson would be consulted. So it's the relevant. So it's not a pick and mix of who we want to go to. It would be the relevant executive member for that area. Then after that, so that would all be recorded in that template business case you've got there, bearing in mind that that will be changed. And then that full business case with kind of all the dates when people have approved the parameters and the sign off goes to Staffing Matters and Urgency for noting after the event. So it's for noting purposes. And Staffing Matters and Urgency therefore get a lot more of the detail around the case and the reasons and the monetary values and the costs associated with that. The process then was to bring to yourselves once a year the kind of overarching figures and costs which I've included within the report in that analysis section at paragraph 27. I've showed you the figures for the last 5 years just so you've got some context really, rather than just showing you figures for the past 18 months really. So the SMU have seen the papers from those that have gone from October 2019. And based on that template as we've shown. What I did want to say, there was a question from one of the members of the public at the beginning. I can confirm that the settlement agreements listed from October all include a confidentiality clause. So they do. So there's a standard confidentiality clause that is often used, and they have been included in the settlement agreements. And just to point out that in financial terms of a settlement agreement involving the school, it's determined by the head teacher and or the governing body, and we only get involved from the council in terms of the HR advice and legal advice, but that the teacher, the head teacher or the governing body is that approval process. And I'll leave it there, Chair, and open it up.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a number of questions, but I've just got a question that I must just ask. Can you just give the difference between a settlement, between a confidentiality clause and an NDA? Because they do seem to be used. They seem to be used. It's hard to tell what's a confidentiality clause, what's an NDA, and are we using NDAs within the local authority, or are we using confidentiality clauses within the local authority?
So I will start this, and it might need Janie's legal expertise to support as well. So on page 50 at paragraph 9, that's the definition of the non-disclosure agreement. So it's often around protecting the confidentiality and proprietary information or trade secrets.
Yeah.
So often it's around that NDA is around that kind of trade secret kind of a point. The standard kind of confidentiality clause in a settlement agreement is around only permitting the employee to disclose its terms in limited situations, so in terms of immediate family or to legal or professional advisors. So it's around that, keeping the details of the settlement agreement confidential. I don't know, Janie, you want to add a little bit more in terms of that definition?
No, I think you're quite right. It is very, very much open to confusion. So and the two are kind of used one for the other. So there is different types of confidentiality. NDA is much more towards trade secrets, or in a legal field, for example, it's a bit like if you were going to, in a private practice, going to work for a competitor, and you might sort of take clients with you, etc., or share details and things like that. So it is two distinct differences, but I think as we're reviewing this process, it is something that we need to look at and offer greater clarity and transparency by what we mean here at City of York, and be consistent in a term that we actually use that is meaningful rather than causing confusion. So it is something that I do want to look at.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I see Councillor Webb's asking a supplementary. I've got Councillors Fisher and Daubney with their hands up, but I'm just going to ask my supplementary to the point that you both have just made, the points you've just made, is, so can I be clear, are City of York Council using NDAs as they are defined and described as the non-disclosure agreement, or are they using confidentiality clauses, and are they described as confidentiality clauses? Because I'm still not clear whether the figures in the table are related to confidentiality clauses or in relation to NDAs.
So the figures in the table relate to the settlement agreements that we've made.
Yeah.
So that mutual termination of the employment contract, so the settlement agreement with members, previous members of staff, and within those settlement agreements include a confidentiality clause. We do not have any standalone non-disclosure agreements.
Right. So but we also have no non-disclosure agreements within settlement agreements. They are always described as confidentiality clauses. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's a confidentiality clause, not a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. Yeah. Councillor Webb.
Yeah, sorry to go on about this, but just to get it right, I mean, paragraph 12, for example, it does definitely say confidentiality clause and then NDA in brackets. So, like, you know, so to be clear, a confidentiality clause, is that essentially say you can't talk about the settlement agreement and the non-disclosure agreement, which you might sign up to, that might itself come with a settlement, an amount of money or something. That is about, you can't talk about the company, the council, whatever it is you've signed up to not talk about. Is that the difference? One's about the actual settlement itself, one's about everything else.
Janie?
Shall I?
So
yeah,
I think so.
Typically 9 times out of 10, yes, that is the position. The confidentiality clause does describe what you've just detailed. So it covers the protection of the settlement agreement's existence, etc. The NDA, I was sorry for my pause, because I was trying to think of a situation where it might be included in terms of a trade secret for City of York. So that's why I'm saying 99% we probably would not use an NDA, or I can't think of a circumstance. The only time I can think of a circumstance for an NDA is in a legal profession, for example, a very technical profession in private practice, where it is literally competitive information that you want to take with you and use to someone else's advantage. So you'd be prevented from doing that. But yes, it is, as you said, essentially Councillor Webb.
So I've got Councillor Mason, who has the benefit of being at the 2019, the only one of us that was at the 2019 meeting, and I have watched it. Councillor Mason, you were very good. Yes, you have a supplementary.
Well, it was more just to add my experience of NDAs, and when I say that, I don't mean anyone's tried to pay me off or anything like that. But when I've used NDAs before in a business sense, actually an NDA can stand as a standalone document with someone you've got a relationship with. It's not, it's not. I suppose I think what confuses it here is we're thinking about, like I said, ending people coming together and deciding they want to end their employment or whatever else. Whereas actually an NDA can be, like Jenny says, it's about business, or it's about secrets, or it's about information, and it can be a totally standalone thing that's got nothing to do with anything to do with HR almost.
That's true. The circumstances I've come across them is in a private practice environment, around in legal field, around, in, believe it or not, insurance claims and insurance litigation. So if you're a defence litigator for insurance claims, NDAs cover trade secrets and practices to protect industry information if you want to change firms and go and work for another one, for example. So it's probably very common as well in the IT world. So for IT development, in terms of trade secrets as well, on copyright situations as well. So those are the kind of classic examples that come to mind where it would be a standalone agreement, which is protect that interest.
Thank you. I will get to Councillors Fisher and Daubney, but Councillor Lomas has another supplementary. Councillor Lomas.
It's supplementary, but it's more of a suggestion than a question. I wonder if we can sort of, or if somebody can go away and reach an agreement about terminology that we're going to use, because I have some experience of dealing with confidentiality clauses in settlement agreements through my other part of my job, and also non-disclosure agreements, that either standalone ones or ones that are made at the end of a contract of employment, or ones that are in the contract of employment itself. So I do think it would be helpful, and I think reading this report, I got myself confused because of the references in what is written here to non-disclosure agreements, and then what you said at the beginning, Trudy, about the fact that they're not actually in use. So perhaps some clarity of terminology, and we can all then make sure that we're using a common description for this. But I did also just want to make a point about confidentiality clauses in settlement agreements, because I do know because I deal with it from the other side, as a trade union rep, that quite often they are very difficult to enforce, because but of the difficulty of dealing with something after the fact, and when you no longer have an employment relationship with somebody. And in many cases they are very, very simple, because of the fact that they're difficult to enforce, and so often they just ask people not to disclose the sum of that has been settled on, or other very, very simple things. So I think it would be helpful. I think that the issue of non-disclosure agreements seems to have become something that I wonder if it's actually not in real life, and it feels very much that we're all worrying about this, and I wonder if we could get some clarity so that we can understand whether it is something we do need to be concerned about or not. How are they used? What kind of things are being kept confidential? Not the details, clearly, because that would be a breach of confidentiality by the employer, and they also have a duty of confidentiality in those agreements. But the kinds of things, talking in the sort of global, not the specific, that would just help us and reassure us, and potentially reassure members of the public as well, that these are being used in a proper way.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Chair, if I can just respond to
yes,
that, I
please
think
do.
Councillor Lomas's comments are really helpful. I think is looking at this as a sort of a newer person looking at this process, I think there is, without question, I think we all agree that it does need to be reviewed. I think this is kind of a new-ish thing that City of York is experiencing at the moment, and clearly it needs to be clearer. They need to be fit for purpose. We need a single use of understanding of terminology, and I think we also need to invest slightly more time in members' understanding of what these documents actually are, in kind of like a basic term, and put back into some sort of perspective actually what the purpose these serve and the priority that they're given or not, and also have them looked at and the process looked at in the right place in the organisation as well. So, you know, this is a new process that came in relatively new. I think 2019 you've just said, and Councillor Mason was the only person on it. So I think we've previously said that we are committed to undertaking a fundamental review of this entire process, and I think Councillor Lomas's comments are really pertinent to assist us with that. So we will do that.
Right, I'm going to go to Councillor Daubney because he's not had a chance to speak yet. Councillor Daubney.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very obliged to you. Just if I can ask Trudy, looking at the breakdown of financial years and figures we had before us, Trudy, looking at the period 2020, which tends to rather stand out from the other amounts quoted, I'm assuming it includes a period of senior team restructuring. Am I correct in that? And if so, how many ADs and directors were included in those figures? Because clearly there would be a higher cost, remuneration, pension costs and so on, which would kind of inflate these figures as opposed to other years when those restructures haven't occurred. Thank you.
I haven't got that. So yes, it does include senior restructure within that. I haven't got the details of the numbers behind that, but I can circulate that tomorrow when I can look at the data.
That was very helpful. Thank you very much.
But can I just clarify, these settlements don't include pension strain. They are just in respect of the payments.
Yeah.
I've got Councillors Fisher and then Councillor Webb. Councillor Fisher, I think you had your hand up first.
Thank you. It's rare my blood boils, but there was an article in the press on the 29th of March which really got me very, very upset indeed, because it persistently referred to these NDAs as gagging orders. Can I just have it confirmed, please, that they are not the sort of gagging orders that ex-presidents of the United States use to pay money to cover up any misdemeanors they may have happened, as we've seen? Can we clarify, please, that they are not gagging orders, they are not there to disguise and cannot disguise or hide malpractice within the council?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Chair?
Yes, whoever feels appropriate to answer it.
From my professional perspective, gagging orders is a unfortunate term or phraseology. It doesn't really exist in legal terms. You either seek an injunction to prevent something happening, for example, or you have some sort of alternative agreement, a mutual agreement, such as a settlement agreement. So I think gagging order is an unfortunate phrase that's come about during the media or common debate. So from my instance, we'd either look at an injunction, depending on how serious it is, an agreement, or alternative means of addressing a situation. So that's my professional perspective. I don't know if Trudy wants to add to anything.
Yeah, Trudy? I can come. Yeah, so we have said that we don't use the settlement agreements for that kind of cover up, as you've alluded to, in a sense, especially around that safeguarding issues or whistleblowing, etc. So they're not used for that purpose.
And I think there is guidance, is there not, in respect of NDAs as far as local authorities are concerned, and that they should be used very, very, very sparingly. Is that correct? It doesn't matter. I think it's a general point.
If we did require a situation where there was an NDA, it is an area where we'd seek specialist legal advice. So it's not something that there's got the skill set in-house to give advice on. It is something that I would be clear would need specialist external legal advice on, as to whether the merits of it, is it required, is it the right resolution, what are the circumstances coming up to it, because they are not, they're not common. So that is an area where I would want specialist support.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just felt that article didn't in any way reflect what is actually happening at the council, and I think it cast unmerited aspersions on this council and its basically how honest this council is, and I was shocked by it. I thought the press would have been a little bit more responsible than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. Sort of two questions that follow on, really. I suppose my first question is, top of page 58 says how the proposal is made can vary depending on the circumstances, but reasons for the proposal should be given when the proposal is made. And in regards to a settlement agreement, I suppose it's a question of how do we decide, or how do the people who are making the decisions decide what is a reasonable reason, and things like that. And my other question, and also how is that sort of maintained across multiple settlements? How is it that we make sure it's a fair system across the board is really my question. And then my second one is, in the table of information of numbers, there's obviously a separate section for schools, and I'm just sort of trying to get to the nub of why confidentiality clauses might be included within settlement agreements. It could be within schools or with anything. Why is it that there's a need for confidentiality around the settlement agreement? That might be a broad and simple question, I know, but is there any sort of background to why that's happened? Because obviously this is a serious thing, and this is what leads to people talking about gagging clauses and things like that. So what's the sort of reason behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm particularly interested in the schools element of that question. Why would a school need a confidentiality clause? Sorry, just on the side. Yes, please, Trudy.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the first question around kind of reason. So each case is often different, and when we're looking at that kind of mutual decision to kind of often terminate the contract, we may be approached by the trade union with the individual kind of asking to go under mutual a mutual agreement and to go quicker, often therefore not necessarily working notice periods. There may be long-term sick issues involved. There may be it's difficult to give you a definitive kind of, it's not a list of issues that we'd consider it. It depends on the unique circumstances. In terms of consistency, the legal advice comes from our internal legal team, which is currently kind of one person advising on that. So the employment lawyer has that kind of breadth of knowledge across the schools as well, in terms of the potential cases that could be considered for that mutual settlement. I think I'll say in this that there is many cases where we may be approached for that kind of mutual settlement, or it's considered and it doesn't progress. So obviously you're getting the figures here in a sense of the ones that have been approved and gone through, that they're not, I think, kind of to get across to you, that they're not everybody that approaches us about them, they all do not go through, is what I'm trying to say. So in terms of that consistency, we've got internal legal advice that we get across all those cases. So that discussion, I think you made reference to the point at the top of page 58. It's having those discussions. So what happens normally is the service area or the trade union and the HR person, along with the employment lawyer, would have those discussions around what is the case, is there any merit in progressing it, what's potential costs, etc., before we then involve an executive member around this is a recommendation, what do you think, and like that consistency in terms of there's only a small number of HR colleagues that are involved in them, and therefore that knowledge and experience. With regards to the school question, I mean, I probably can't answer in a lot of detail. I don't know some of the detail around the school cases. My understanding, though, is that we use a generic confidentiality clause within the settlement agreements, and that appears to be a standard generic confidentiality clause that is often used, and Councillor Lomas might, from her kind of expertise as a kind of trade union rep, it is in there. So again, it's not a gagging order. It's often kind of don't disclose the details of the money that you've been given, etc. So it's around those generic clauses. Again, we can't use it for, so if there's a safeguarding issue in a school, that we wouldn't do a settlement agreement based around that. I don't know whether Janie, you want to add a little bit more around that generic clause.
Yeah. So as Trudy's just said, confidentiality clauses are standard, fairly standard, included in a settlement agreement. They often cover things such as each party, so the employer and the employee, agrees not to make any adverse or derogatory comments about each other. It also sometimes covers provision of a reference in an agreed form. And I just want to make it very clear, though, it does not prevent an employee, for example, making a protected disclosure or a whistleblowing sort of allegation, etc. So it's not that sort of like tying the hands, but they are fairly standard clauses in terms of basic issues such as derogatory comments, adverse comments, and it's mutually respectful.
Thanks. Now, it's incredibly remiss of me. We're now an hour and a half into this meeting, and I haven't called a break, and I didn't say at the beginning that I would call a break. I can see this discussion could potentially go on for another 5-10 minutes, perhaps even longer. And I don't know about you, but I'm desperate for the loo. So I'm going to suggest that we reconvene in 10 minutes. Is everybody cool with 10 minutes? And we'll continue this agenda item and then work through to the end of tonight's meeting. Is that okay, everybody?
Yeah, I'll make it.
Yeah, cool. So for those watching at home, we will now move to a holding screen whilst we can all go off and make a cup of tea or whatever. Thanks. Thank you and welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody's suitably refreshed. Now we will continue with the agenda item relating to settlement agreements. We just heard last from Trudy talking about various schools related issues, and Councillor Webb had his hand up for a supplementary. So I will go to Councillor Webb and then I've got Councillor Fisher. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic, and might I in future ask that we maybe do this like don't take supplementaries between the two. I've got to try and remember it now. But that I think my key
Apologies.
point was, we were talking about the fact that the confidentiality clause is a standard clause within a settlement agreement. And apologies, I don't know more of the details here, but I suppose my question is, well, what are the standard clauses within the settlement agreement that highlight the fact and almost give protection to individuals about safeguarding concerns and about whistleblowing concerns? Because I imagine, as Councillor Fisher mentioned earlier about gagging clauses, it's in the public eye, people are concerned about non-disclosure agreements, what you can disclose, what you couldn't disclose. But I imagine, in huge swathes across the council, there'll be people who work directly or indirectly with safeguarding issues being a daily occurrence. This is going to be something that people deal with, and it would be unfortunate if we were missing things because people were almost a little bit afraid to raise a concern. And I was just sort of saying, what is within that process and the actual piece of paper itself that highlights what you can and can't do?
Chair, so the fact that the confidentiality agreements, the standard clauses, don't prohibit whistleblowing or protected disclosures. Whistleblowing and protected disclosures are actually covered by a separate piece of legislation. So the protections come from a separate piece of legislation. So if you make a protected disclosure or whistleblowing, you're actually protected by something completely separate. So it's nothing to do with the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement and the confidentiality clauses do not prevent anybody from having the access to be able to make a whistleblowing complaint or protected disclosure.
Right, I'm going to go to Trudy before I come back to you, Bob.
So I'll just clarify. So there is actually in the confidentiality clause in the settlement agreement, it does say that it doesn't prevent the employee from making those. And on each settlement agreement, the individual has to get legal advice and guidance to sign up to it. So their legal advisor will explain that to them as well, but there is a paragraph in there that states what kind of Janie's just said, so that would be explained to the individual and it's in writing by their legal advisor.
Thank you. Are you happy with that? I'll go to Councillor Fisher now.
Thank you. With regard to non-disclosure agreements, I mean, I've been speaking to quite a few of my friends who are in industry who've all been getting to the point where they've either been taking redundancy or early retirement. They've all had to sign these. The only question is, how do we enforce them? How do we know, for example, that somebody who is leaving the council with knowledge of contracts isn't going to some third party and using that information to their advantage? And secondly, what recourse would we have if that were found to have occurred?
I think Councillor Lomas, you've got a supplementary. Is that
well,
before
I just want to question because I think Councillor Fisher is probably talking about non-disclosure agreements, which I think has been clarified are not in use. So the confidentiality clauses refer only to the details of the settlement, not to information you have about contracts or things like that. So I think we're in danger of getting muddled background again, because the confidentiality clause is about, if I had signed one, it would say that I cannot say that I've entered into a settlement agreement and have been paid X pounds by City of York Council for that. And City of York Council can't say it. And sometimes they say things that Trudy alluded to, I think, about I can't make derogatory statements about my employer, and it might say something about the terms on which they will give me a reference. It's nothing to do with any sort of contract or information or anything like that I know. So I just think we need to absolutely be really clear about this. Neither Janie nor Trudy could give us an example of a non-disclosure agreement like that being in place in the council. So let's not sort of go down a rabbit warren that we don't need to.
Sorry,
Trudy,
what it says is
sorry.
No standalone NDAs. It doesn't say that they haven't been used as part of an agreement anywhere.
No, that is what Trudy said to us earlier, Councillor Fisher.
I thought it was only standalone ones that she referred to. It says in the report.
Right. Let's just clarify. What did you say, Trudy? Did you say
So I said that we had
don't
no
use any?
standalone ones, and we haven't used any non-disclosure agreements. So we have used confidentiality clauses in the settlement agreement since October 19.
Right.
So we haven't actually used any, but they could be used.
They could be used, and I think that's what Janie said before. If we were looking to use an NDA, we would have to get specialist legal advice around what would go in one. And again, in terms of enforcing that, then we'd need that specialist legal advice around that what was in that NDA and how you would then enforce it.
That's the problem, because its enforcement is my worry if we went down that particular line. I'm pleased to hear we haven't done, so that's good news.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? So can I just ask then, just hypothetically, if there was an ex gratia payment made in respect of an exit package, that ex gratia payment would include a confidentiality clause, not an NDA.
Yeah, so an ex gratia payment could be included within that settlement agreement in terms of the mutual agreement to terminate a contract, and within that settlement agreement would be the confidentiality clause. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Are there any other questions before we move on from this agenda item? I don't see any. So I will just ask, before Trudy goes, the review of the business case that you've both indicated is in need of review following recent events. When will that be reviewed? How long will it take? And will it come to A&G?
Janie, are you able to?
Yes, so the review is going to take a couple of months because I do want to look at circumstances around the 2019 report. I also want to take into account views of yourselves, and I also need to consult with the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee as well. I need to consult with the other chief officers, particularly Ian Floyd as the head of paid service. I think I also just want to sort of support on clarity. So I am not ruling out getting some external legal advice as well on contents of a business case, etc., to look into this. So I don't really want to commit onto a time frame that says it's going to be in the next 3 weeks, for example. Okay. I want to do the process thoroughly, and I'm very happy to report back to this committee that's got overarching responsibility for governance. And there may also be implications on the draft constitution as well, because it may have to look at schemes of delegation, may have to look at terms of reference of not just this committee, for example, but Staffing Matters Committee. You know, there's an opportunity in that process for all members and officers to feed into that as well. So I feel a bit reluctant to commit to a very defined time period, but it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm just more interested in about the process and that it will come to committee.
Yeah, because there's the trade unions as well. Sorry, Chair. There's the trade unions as well.
Yeah.
That have obviously got a role in this. So, you know, that's another reason why I'm a bit reluctant to try and commit to a time frame, because there are so many other people involved outside of this committee that, you know, they've all got very busy agendas. And I want to make sure that people like the trade unions have got enough time to consult with members, consult with chief officers, head of paid service, for example, and Trudy and her colleagues. So I just want to make sure that it's done thoroughly and that everybody's had the opportunity to put a view forward.
So just on that topic, whilst we're in the process of doing the review, Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee are currently using the old style business case template for issues that are coming to them over the next few weeks until this review's been completed.
So this process that is here, this business case template.
This business case template that you've got in Annex 2.
Yeah,
this
business
case
template is the framework and the ethos of it is, but I'm in the process of looking to make sure that it remains fit for purpose with it almost immediate effect for any future determinations. So, so as the chief legal officer for the city, I'm wanting to make sure it's as comprehensive as possible. And if I feel that there's additional sections or it needs subtly changing for the business case template, I will do that in my professional capacity.
Yes, fine, thank you. Right, thank you very much, Trudy. I'm sure we will see you again at some time.
I think I'm staying on, Chair, for the next item, so you'll see me very
marvellous.
soon.
Well, yes, but even better, key corporate risk. Oh, yes, of course you are. Absolutely. So, thank you. I shall now move on to agenda item 8, which is monitor 2, the key corporate risks. And we have got a report. I'm guessing Debbie's going to be presenting this. She'll correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think Sarah will.
It's me.
Sarah's joined.
Oh, hello, Sarah.
Hello. I've been lurking.
Yes, I didn't spot you there. Yes, lovely to see you. So I shall hand over to you. And yes, please crack on.
Thank you. Yes, so just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Kirby. I'm the Principal Accountant in Corporate Finance. And yes, you haven't seen me for a while because this is only the second monitor that we've done for 2020-21. And I ducked out of the last one because it was my birthday. So I thought that was a good enough excuse.
Absolutely.
So this is the KCR report. We've got a summary at Annex A of all the KCRs. And then, as Trudy just said, she's done the detailed analysis that we've got this time, which is KCR 10, which is about workforce capacity. So that's included at Annex B. And so Trudy can answer any questions on that. So the main changes since the last monitor that we did in September, they're covered from paragraph 15. I won't go through them all, but just point out a couple of the main things, which are that we've removed one of the KCRs, which was Brexit, because that actually related to what sort of agreement we might have at the outcome of that. So obviously that's in place now. So we don't consider that a KCR anymore. And another thing I'll just mention is that it was because it was commented on at the last meeting that we've looked at the scores for KCR 1, financial pressures, and KCR 6, health and well-being, and we've modified the gross and the net scores there, so they've increased. And another just presentational change I've made is that previously we had some of the ongoing actions were included in the action column because they're sort of annual sort of things. So I've now included those in the control columns because I thought that makes more sense. They are actually happening, so I would class them as a control. And all the changes are highlighted in Annex A as new if they're something different to last time. So I'll just leave it there and let you ask any questions of either myself or Trudy.
Thank you, thank you. And yes, I do note that there have been a number of new risks added and changes made to the scoring on the strength of the last time this came to committee, and I hope you had a lovely birthday. But Debbie did brilliantly in your absence. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. I was going to question the removal of KCR 13, since Brexit is still a very live and genuine threat to the viability of our economy and this council, in my opinion. But obviously, since that was specifically through to the concerning the actual quality of the deal we get, I can understand that's a rationale for removing it. Presumably, though, the effects of Brexit, potential effects on things like business rates if companies go out of business or relocate abroad, they have been rolled into KCR1, which is the actual financial pressure on the council, have they?
That's exactly right, and that was, I mean, even when we included KCR 13 as a one in its own right, we'd taken account of all the other pressures it might have on any of the other KCRs and the other services, and that continues to be the case.
Thank you. As long as it's not been ignored.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions in respect of Sarah's before we go into the detailed KCR, which is workforce? Oh, Councillor Webb.
Thank you. On KCR 2 governance, there's a mention, and Janie, you might be able to help with this one as well. Obviously, there's mention about plans for the end of remote meetings or what might happen next. I suppose one risk is the exclusion of councillors, and that sort of a lack of democracy there, I suppose, and therefore a lack of oversight from the variety of members we have across the city. If we can't go to some form of hybrid meetings going forward. And I was just wondering, is there within all this sort of any thought as for a control or an action that could be taken regarding anything around that?
So, Chair, you happy for me to answer that?
Yeah.
At the moment, this is a developing risk, and it's a little bit too early to put any sort of mitigation factors on the KCR document itself. The reason why I say that is because we're in a sort of a hiatus period at this moment in time. There's a judicial review which is due to be heard on the 21st of April, which will determine whether the government's current position of return to face-to-face meetings as of 1 minute past midnight on the 7th of May will resume, with no possibility whatsoever of a formal meeting being held with any support of remote means, or whether the High Court is going to overturn the government's decision and then allow some form of either wholly remote, which is how we're operating right at this moment, or a mixture of physical, hybrid and remote. So there is a cross-party working group that's been established to look at all of this. It is meeting this week. It is a high topic of consideration on everybody's agenda, and I think as the days unfold and the meetings take place, we'll then be able to work with Sarah around ascertaining sort of greater clarity around this risk, the mitigation factors, and also City of York's kind of response really going forward in terms of how we deliver the meetings, how we ensure that there's democratic participation from absolutely everybody that needs to be there. So it is just a little bit early at the moment. Clearly, it's a high risk for me at the moment. I'm a little bit nervous of having some major decisions being debated in a meeting where it's minimum quoracy, and the quoracy levels set by the Constitution. I don't think that's democratically fair, and it exposes the council a little bit. So it is definitely a work in progress, but it's cross-party work in progress at this moment in time.
Thank you. I've got supplementaries from Councillors Fisher and Lomas. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. I fully support Councillor Webb's comments on that. This is not just about party political exclusion, or excluding individual councillors. It's all about equalities, because there are quite a large number of councillors on this authority who I happen to know, because they told me, have had health problems and may be excluded from actual meetings in person simply because of that. And that is totally unacceptable. And I wonder whether the government's advice actually breaches the Equalities Act, bearing in mind the fact that it seems to cut across disability, illness and such matters. So I am deeply worried and deeply concerned by the government's advice, and it is a major risk to democracy on this council, in my view.
And there's a lot of officers as well who are in the same position. There's a lot of key officers who are fundamental to the delivery of meetings, who also have the same health issues, well-being concerns generally as well. So it's the same argument for the officers that are involved as well.
It was very remiss of me not to include officers. I should have done, and I apologise.
Katie, Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. I was going to make a very similar point to Councillor Fisher, but I would just also note that the council is also subject to the public sector equality duty, which asks the relevant employers not just to avoid discrimination, but actually to promote equality. So it goes far further than just the requirement on any employer not to discriminate, but it asks public sector employers to promote equality in the things that they do and the way that they do them. I think that I would also add members of the public to that as well. I know that technically, if we're having to have this meeting in person, we could still have members of the public phoning in, but I think it would still lead to a differential treatment for some members of the public against others. So all of those things, I think, need to be taken into account.
Yeah, so the current, if I can just comment, the current government guidance to the period from the 7th of May through to the 21st of June is at this moment in time that any physical meeting that we have, that's a face-to-face meeting that complies with social distancing, subject to risk assessment, subject to public health advice, and a number of other factors, is also live streamed. The government guidance actively discourages members of the public physically attending a face-to-face meeting, and the government is promoting the live stream of the face-to-face meeting as a means for the members of the public to still observe the meetings, but also we would intend to maintain the telephone system as well, of being able to ring into the meetings as well, whilst the government guidance really actively discourages members of the public from attending any face-to-face meeting for that period of time. As a monitoring officer, it's an uncomfortable position to be in, and that is a view that is shared by many of my colleagues up and down the country, and hence there's an awful lot of effort being put into providing evidence to support the judicial review application that is being put to the High Court, that is being run by the Association of Democratic Services Officers, Hertfordshire County Council, and is supported by the Local Government Association as well.
Oh, I was just going to ask you. It's not a City of York Council action against the government. It's
No. It's a nationwide. It's got nationwide support, but it's brought by Hertfordshire County Council and ADSO.
Yeah, lovely. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. And I think actually that issue that Councillor Lomas has raised regarding equalities going forward, I think it's important that we look at how we're, not risking excluding people by not having a hybrid system in 2 or 3 years, 4 years. I think it could be really important. But my question was about so the change of the structure to the people directorate, and I'm not entirely certain where this would fit within the corporate risks. It might be, I'm thinking it would be sort of KCR 5 about safeguarding, and my concern is that we've got a director of people now who I'm sure is doing an excellent job, but has gone from just dealing with children's services and there being someone entirely separate dealing with adult services to now that whole process being one person's responsibility. And I suppose the risk I'm concerned, the thing I'm concerned about is that loss of oversight purely because that person is suddenly looking at twice as much, probably slightly more than twice as much. And I just wonder how that is fed into this document, if it is fed into this document, and what's going on there.
So, I mean, it's not specifically fed in, as in we've not made any mention of that as part of the controls about the changes in people's roles. I mean, I don't know if someone else can answer this better than me that has been more involved in the high level corporate reorganisation. But I mean, I would say that since you have the other roles underneath are taking, there's still somebody responsible for those areas. I don't know. Yeah, I probably can't say any more than that. I mean, it's not fed into the document, and as far as that level of area that the corporate director is now looking after, yes, it is broader, but people at the lower level have got the same responsibilities.
Thank you, Trudy. I see you waving your hand. Are we about to move into your section?
No, I was just going to clarify to support Sarah there in a sense of the management structure. So acknowledging that there's one corporate director of people, we've strengthened the management structure underneath. So putting in 2 directors and then the assistant directors and heads of service underneath that. So it is a strengthened management team underneath it, which would mitigate some of that risk, I suppose, is what you've highlighted, Councillor Webb.
Yeah, I think it's a concern, and to be honest, I'm using the people directorate because it's the one I sort of know more about. But wherever you've had these corporate restructures and things, I suppose there's a certain element of what sort of training is going in to support these people who are suddenly taking on huge services that they might not have had something to do with before. And it's just, if something goes wrong in that directorate, it's serious, and it's something that I think that it should be considered. But I can understand what you mean, Sarah. I think you're right there. Thank you.
I mean, I do think, Sarah, that when we get onto the workforce stuff, which I think Trudy's about to do now, but certainly in respect of losing skills and expertise, cover a range. I mean, Councillor Webb's raised safeguarding. I would say the local plan, for example, is a significant risk to the council. And I see that you have made reference to it in the in KCR 8, and I think next time we do have a KCR review in detail, I would ask whether committee think that we ought to look at the local plan, because I can't remember us considering that KCR in this iteration of audit and governance. So I think it's probably about due, don't you think? I mean, can Debbie just remind me, or Sarah just remind me, when the last time local plan did come to A&G?
Do you mean as part of the KCR
KCRs?
report?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So it was probably about 18 months ago, because they have been coming in numerical order. So now that we're on 10, it would have been, so it might not have even been that long ago, but we've only had 2 for 2021. As I said, the last one was in September, and before that it would probably been in about, well, I think we probably missed the March one, so I would say probably December 2019 was the one before that, which I think local plan would have come to. I mean, I can double check that, but that's my estimate of when it would have been.
So if it was December, so it's not one that we've looked at, and it probably, given the stage we're at, it's probably well worth us looking at the risks within within the local plan.
So would you like that to come back instead of KCR 11 next time? We could.
I mean, we can have a chat about it and come to a conclusion. I don't want to. Yeah. I don't want to say that that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We are a democracy. So, Trudy, KCR 10.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. I don't know how these have previously been presented before, so my intention wasn't to go through the whole of the annex page by page. I know you'll have had the opportunity
Good.
to read it. I suppose in a sense it's to kind of give you the assurances of the risks that are there in that reduction of workforce and trying to make financial savings, and to give you assurances about the kind of welfare of the staff, both going through those processes, those staff that we retain, those staff that we might attract into the organisation. And a significant amount of this is around that support, especially going through COVID, from a health and wellbeing perspective. And I know corporate scrutiny committee are very interested and keep a thorough eye really on the well-being of our staff and what we're doing. I think in a sense that the controls that are in place I've kind of elaborated a little bit around those controls that are there, and covering really all of that, kind of looking after our workforce. So whilst we may be reducing the workforce, we do everything we can to, in that consultation process, if we are restructuring, to make sure we work very closely with the trade unions and with all the staff. And we have a lot of processes in place to try and mitigate any compulsory redundancies. So looking at what vacancies we can hold, potentially looking at where people might want to volunteer to go, and we can then, the traditional bumping arrangements, people might remember it being called as, where we then move people that are at risk roles into roles that we're keeping. So it's quite a complex area. I suppose the annex covers pretty much everything around the kind of workforce and what we're doing to support the workforce, as well as that kind of key risk of the overall reduction.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? No. Well, can I just ask, on page 94, you've talked about lack of succession planning. There's a risk as the organisation is small. We're looking at developing career pathways in certain areas to develop staff and retain them with an opportunity to progress through the grades. How's that going to look in an environment in which we are working remotely and we are reducing the number of managerial roles within the organisation?
Yeah, so I think I've said it. We kind of need to reinvigorate this really in terms of that succession plan and be really clear on what we need to do. That there is a bit around the certain areas, so such of our social workers, etc. It's about growing our own and really developing our own. So taking staff through and giving them the training, using apprenticeship levy money, and really upskilling staff in those areas to grow our own and keep and retain staff. You're right in a sense. I mean, the remote issue, I suppose, in a sense of the staff have worked really well over the past 12 months in this remote work, some better than others. And obviously as we come through the government's roadmap and can kind of increase the use in our COVID secure buildings, we can have much more of that kind of face-to-face contact and development. But I don't think the remote bit is so much an issue. I think we are a very small organisation, so that succession planning is often quite difficult. We do a lot in terms of developing staff, but sometimes we may be developing staff who go on to leave the organisation and get promotion elsewhere, because as you go up the kind of the hierarchy, there's limited posts, and as you say, we're reducing numbers of that kind of managerial level, which makes actually the opportunity for some of those development opportunities aren't there. But that succession planning is probably, we need to concentrate, and I know that the people directorate are really focusing on that as part of their workforce, in that growing your own, and especially in areas where we're struggling to recruit. So it's thinking outside the box of, instead of us being competing for the same staff and having to pay the money for them, actually growing our own and developing staff, and also that opportunity for people to move over into areas where they wouldn't have thought of moving into prior to being in the council. So somebody might have come in terms of business administration and not thought about social care, etc., for example, and encouraging that kind of sideways move and that use of that apprenticeship levy as well as the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Councillor Webb, you've got supplementary.
Yeah, I think on the question of social care staff, I think this is it's a major issue for the council, and in terms of risks, it represents a huge overspend as well, because as we can't get the staff in, we're then paying for agency staff, and it's not great. And you're right to highlight that we are growing our own. We have got the social work academies, which is a good thing. But the truth of the matter is we're not financially competitive, shall we say, with some other councils in the very near sort of geography. So I suppose it's what is it that we can offer? I mean, it's great that we're growing our own, but what I'd be worried about is we get to a situation where you've got a lot of your social care staff who've got less than 2-3 years experience, and I'm, the turnover is pretty rapid, I imagine, but what is it that we can offer beyond that to keep and to retain those staff?
So I know the workforce group within People are looking into that. I don't have the details around that. We can possibly share outside the meeting, Councillor Webb. They are focused on that, and they are real issues. We're in a very competitive market nationally now, in a sense of, because of the remote working. Actually, you've got a lot more social workers, etc., actually just kind of moving around the country in a sense of that. That more kind of agile workforce. So I don't think there isn't an easy answer to it. I think we'd be all kind of fighting for that silver bullet, really. There isn't an easy answer, and I think it's going to have to be a bit of a toolbox and a number of different kind of opportunities and things. We can't match it in terms of pay in some areas, and I think you've rightly said, in terms of agency staff, what you get is some of the social workers going, well, I'll go agency because it's that temporary nature. You're paying more for that temporary nature because you can get like a week's notice and off you go. You can't compete with that higher salary on a permanent position. So it is about, how do we sell the benefits of working at York, the environment, the non-pay benefits, really. How do we really develop staff? How do we look after them? How's the health and well-being perspective? So it's incorporating all them issues into that kind of attraction. And it's not easy, and we're doing the same as what many other councils are doing.
Thank you. And on page 96, you've raised a number of sort of implications, which I think are directly relevant to the points that you're making. That difficulty in attracting staff and retaining staff and giving them career progression has impacts on workload, has impacts on morale and staff turnover. But I'm also concerned about the impact on the vulnerable customer groups that this will lead to. And whilst I absolutely understand the financial imperatives that the council may be in, these are really significant risks to the client group. Is that a concern? Sorry, I don't know who's dealing with that.
Do you want me
Trudy?
to? Yeah, so I can. So I suppose it's down there as an implication. I suppose if you went in and cut 50% of the staff in one area, that would have a significant impact. I suppose that's where when you're looking at where the reductions come from, where savings can be made across the workforce, that is the delivery of the service and what needs to be retained is at the forefront of the manager's mind and the chief officer's mind when they're considering any restructure or savings. And we have statutory duties that must be maintained. And they're obviously part of the what we need to deliver as a council, and that they can't be they can't be cut. So I think it's listed there not to ignore it, I suppose. And but I don't feel it's currently a significant issue or a kind of a concern for us as a senior team at this present time.
And do we get, you'll have to remind me because my memory is appalling, does this committee get to look at the results of the staff survey, the annual staff surveys? Which committee does that go to if it's not us?
It's gone to Customer and Corporate Services Scrutiny Committee. I mean, they're all available on our internal website, so we can share the links round to members of this committee. But previously we have gone to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee as part of the wellbeing of staff. So the staff surveys are seen as that kind of health and wellbeing, and where they've got any issues or concerns, they've referred them to the relevant scrutiny committees of the directorates.
That's really helpful. Yeah, at least they are being considered every year. Yeah, great. Are there any additional questions from colleagues regarding KCR 10? No? Well, that's wonderful. So can I just ask opinions on what we want to see next time? I've made a starter for 10, which was local plan, but the next one that's scheduled is KCR 11, which is, just remind me, Sarah.
It's external markets.
External markets, yeah. And then number KCR 12 is major incidents. Now, you see, I remember us looking at KCR 12 in December 2019 because we talked about pandemics and said we had a really good action plan in place for pandemics, and then who knew 3 months later we'd end up in a pandemic. But so
it might have been, that might have been part of KCR 6, health and wellbeing.
Was it?
It might have been.
Was it? Oh well, you could be right. No, I'm sure you are right. I mean, I'm not saying you, because as I say, I can't remember what happened last week. So, so what do people think? What do you want to see next time? Does anybody have a view, Councillor Webb?
Yeah, I've always got a view on something, but I suppose if it's going to be, I'm sorry, I missed. When is this going to come to us? But I was thinking that potentially
June.
KCR June. Yeah, I thought it was KCR 2, the governance one. By then it might be useful, given we might be in a slightly different position. We'll be coming close to June 21st. I think in terms of it being a live issue, knowing how meetings are going to go forward and how that might work might be something useful. Otherwise, yes, I think the local plan is the major live issue.
The only reason I mention it is because we've been given a deadline. The council's been given a deadline, a very firm deadline, and there are significant risks. I think of this process being taken out of our hands. I'm not saying that will happen, and I hope it doesn't, but I think it is an issue of concern. So. Unless anybody's saying they don't want to see KCR local plan, I'm going to make a proposal, Sarah, that we get a report in respect of local plan next time.
That's fine.
Yeah, coolio. Right, lovely. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for those contributions. I thought that was a good discussion. So the next agenda item is the work plan. So Janie has had a request in respect of the meeting on the 28th, and I don't know if you just want to 28th of April, sorry. I don't know if you just want to mention what the position that you're in vis-a-vis the Constitution.
So yes, Chair. So it is not going to be ready for publication for a meeting of Audit and Governance Committee on the 28th of April. I think it does need a little bit more time. This is an issue I have discussed with the chair in respect of this. So it is practically in a final draft, but it's a working draft. So therefore it's for members and chief officers to review. And I think for any meaningful discussion, I think that the political groups also need to have time to discuss the implications and proposals in it. And I just don't think there's enough time between now and the 28th of April to fairly allow that to happen.
I'd agree with you, and yes, you did raise this with me, and I totally understood the position that we're in, which does, however, leave us in something. Well, it leaves us in two situations. One, we do need to look at the Constitution when it's ready, and the very points that we were talking about in the last agenda item regarding the democratic deficit and how meetings are going to take place, I think then becomes a very live one as to how this, if you recall, when we looked at this in March, I think
2020,
March
Chair.
2020, yes. We spent 4 hours looking at what was then just a basic tidying up constitution, and we were in a completely different world now. And I don't know if, Jenny, you just want to sort of explain how things have moved on from your perspective since that discussion.
So since the dotting of I's and crossing of T's, obviously I've undertaken a much more fundamental review of the Constitution, and there are issues which are a lot more pertinent to the review of the Constitution that have been discussed this evening as well. I would be extraordinarily reluctant to put a proposed Constitution to a meeting which had a reduced number of members attending in accordance with the current government guidance for meetings, face-to-face meetings from the 7th of May. Also, in terms of a full council meeting as well, the minimum quoracy for a full council meeting as a face-to-face meeting between now and the 21st of June would be 12 members. There's 47 members who are impacted by the council's constitution and need to be aware of it, and therefore I feel that as the monitoring officer, to put something so fundamental for the council just in front of a very restricted group of members, as per the government guidance is currently written, I think is not appropriate, and I don't think that that's fair to anybody or to the city. So that means that the timeframes of the Constitution really are, I'm unable to give any certainty, because I'm obviously waiting the outcome of the judicial review hearing that I referenced earlier, which is on the 21st of April, which will then dictate how we can conduct our business from the 7th of May. So, but those are my current concerns about future meetings, and it being almost restricting members of having a view just by means of the deliverability of a face-to-face meeting as it currently stands.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. But that does leave us in some difficulties in respect of when this will come to a committee. Now, I'm just wondering whether we can work with a plan A and a plan B, and if plan A is that the judicial review succeeds and we're able to continue with remote meetings, would you be in a position to bring this to this committee in May or June time?
I would hope so, but I would also anticipate being guided by all of the elected members and the political groups as well. That it is absolutely fundamental that there is input from all councillors and the political parties. So I'm very happy to fit to a time frame, but again, if I'm requested by all councillors or a significant majority of councillors that they need more time, then I would feel that I would need to honour that request as well. And obviously, outside of this meeting, Chair, I'm very happy to liaise directly with yourself and the Vice Chair around feedback, because I would hope that some members of the council would give their feedback as directly to yourselves as well, given your roles as being custodian on behalf of full council. So I would kind of hope that we could continue a dialogue outside of this committee and undertake to keep all members of this committee informed where we receive the respective feedback.
So given that we need to have this as a one agenda item
I think
meeting,
so.
I suggest that we just keep this fluid and we see where we are in respect of all the points that you've just made, which I think are incredibly valid, and where we are legally in respect of how we can convene meetings. I appreciate that that's everybody likes to have dates for things, but I'm just not sure that that's a feasible position for us to be in, to be able to decide tonight. So with respect, I would ask colleagues if they would then delegate this to the chair and vice chair for to work with the statutory officers to schedule a date for another meeting to consider the constitution. If that's okay, can I just see some nods? Yeah, thank you. Great, cool.
Thank you, Chair.
Which then leaves us with an agenda item free meeting on the 28th. I will refer colleagues back to our last meeting, which I'm sure nobody has forgotten, when we asked of the external auditors when they might be in a position to submit their second report. And I think if colleagues recall correctly, I think they said in short order. I had the opportunity of speaking with the external auditors today, and they are still saying that within short order, it hopefully would mean sometime this month. So I'm going to propose that we keep that April the 28th date open rather than cancel it, just in case the external auditors are in a position to submit a report in time for publication for us to then have that as the single agenda item meeting. If for some reason that's not possible, or if they're not able to submit in time, then all members will be made aware, and we will put it on the council's website that this 28th of April meeting is cancelled. Is that satisfactory with everybody? Yeah, great, marvellous. Was there anything else in the forward plan that we're not aware of? There's nothing statutory that's been missed off, is there, Debbie? We've got the dates for first draft.
Yeah.
That's in June.
Yes.
We've got Mazars coming again in June and in July. And then we're not through till September. Now, you've again left the November meeting out that we agreed that we were going to put in last time. We didn't necessarily have a wide agenda for it set, but we did talk about having a November meeting, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't recall the discussion about November meeting, but certainly I apologise. We can put that in, and I would just say we've got Mazars on every agenda purely to allow for them to bring anything that they wish to bring, essentially.
Cool.
Yeah,
perfect.
So that's November 2021.
Yeah. I think it just works better. Then we've got July, September, November, and then December, and then we'll have another one in February. of 2022. Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, I think just remembering from memory, we actually stipulated that there should be a meeting in October, but I mean, October, November is not important. I think the key thing was to get a meeting in between September and December, because there were very often important points that came up then. So I think that should be put on the rolling programme of events going forward as a perpetual meeting in either late October or November.
Yeah. I mean, I'm easy whether it's late October or early November. But yes, I think we did agree that, and we do want that putting onto the plan, if you like, for audit and governance moving forward. If a subsequent iteration of this committee don't feel that they need it, then they can drop it. But I think we felt that we needed one. So cool, right? Councillor Webb.
Hi, this probably, maybe it doesn't need to go on the work plan. It's not, but we've talked about the independent member, and it's come up at several meetings that we should have an independent member. And Jenny, you're spot on to say yes, it will happen in June. But I just wondered if we could say, and therefore we will have an independent member by a particular date, by a particular meeting, or something like that.
Well, subject to someone applying. There is a significant problem for monitoring officers to seek independent persons, because there is not because we don't pay anything for it. It's a voluntary function, and so
I think we probably have one candidate in that reapply.
You have to have a period of time where you can't automatically come back, so you have to have like a fallow period.
Oh, all right.
And it's the same. Excuse me, it's the same for standards as well. It's quite restricted of how many terms of office you can sit, and then you have to have like a fallow period before you can come back onto a committee.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But there is a significant problem with the appointment of independent persons, both sort of quite nationally, really, because there is not a wealth of applicants.
Right. But an application process will be started, though.
It will, as said previously, the application process more for the audit and governance independent person. We're trying to just reshape the job description and the advert at this moment in time, because you'll be aware from previous meetings that we had feedback on the Redmond review.
Yes, exactly.
And the Redmond review is looking at putting independent persons onto audit and governance committees, because currently, technically in legislation, they're not allowed. No. So the Redmond review is suggesting that they are on committees, but they have some accountancy or audit background. So we're just redefining the job description to try and accommodate the principles that are detailed within the Redmond review at the moment, so that we don't hopefully appoint someone, but then that person would be unable to sit because they don't meet any requirements of the Redmond review. So we're trying to just preempt what might happen going forward.
That's great. Thank you. So I don't have any other business. Is anything else anybody wants to raise? No? Well, from the committee that keeps on giving, we may see you again in the 28th. We may not. But thank you all for your attendance. Thank you to all the officers, including our exceptional technical staff. No meeting should ever go by without us thanking the tech team, because they hold everything together. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody, and talk soon, hopefully.